Darren Jones is with us now, the shadow, it says shadow chancellor, you're not that. You are the shadow chief secretary to the Treasury who works for the shadow
My boss.
chancellor. Your boss.
Yes.
However, I don't know if you saw in, did you see in Jack and Sam's podcast?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Go on, tell us.
No, you tell your viewers. Okay.
You are on the telly, on the breakfast round, not just here, but other breakfast shows, more often than any other member of the shadow cabinet. Why is that?
Well, look, firstly, I must apologise because you're probably sick of seeing me.
We're never sick of seeing you. Always welcome.
You're very kind. I don't know. The broadcasting team make asks of colleagues in the shadow cabinet, and maybe I'm one of them.
Is that because you're a better performer?
No, I think it's probably that I'm daft enough to agree to get up at 5:30 in the morning once a week, to be honest. But I'm always very happy to come out and see you. Okay.
You're very humble. We think it's because you're a very good performer. What's the difference between you and the Tories economically?
Tories, recession, Labour, growth. Rachel will set out today in her May's lecture how we now have a decade of national renewal in front of us, an opportunity that we can seize in this election year if we wish to do so. And people at home will know after 14 years of the Conservatives, they feel worse off and that the economy is in recession and our public services are all in trouble. And so she will set out today how a Labour Party, she is a Labour chancellor if we win this election, will be able to turn that around and get the country back on track.
How are you going to do that if there's no money?
Well, because it's not just about taxpayers' money that gets the economy growing, it's about getting the private sector to invest. And we hear all the time from investors and from businesses, they have the money to invest, but they're not investing in the UK right now for a whole host of reasons. So Rachel will set out today that there are 3 pillars to our approach: stability, investment and reform, economic and political stability, which we've not had for a long time, that decade of investment that will unlock predominantly from the private sector, but alongside the public sector too, and then the reform that government really needs to get a grip of on things like planning reform, apprenticeships, skills, and opportunities for people across the country.
How many times do you think you're going to be dogged by that letter that Liam Byrne left when you left office in 2010?
Well, look, it was unhelpful for Liam to leave that letter in 2010, but as I've said...
Basically, just for people who don't know, there's no money, is what he said.
But what I've said to Conservatives frequently in the past few weeks is I'd very happily come onto your show and compare the books when Labour left office in 2010 to when the Conservatives are now 14 years later. The state of the country's finances are far, far worse now than they were in 2010, after that global banking crisis that people will remember. And Rachel Reeves has been clear about that. If we win the election this year, it will be the worst economic inheritance that any party's had since the Second World War.
You acknowledge it wasn't a very helpful note.
Well, it's proven a useful tool for the Conservatives, so no, but I would contest the letter because actually when Labour left office, the economy was growing, the national debt was very small compared to what it is now, and after that global banking crisis... Also, there was failure before the pandemic. The pandemic, obviously, we all recognise was unexpected, but there was failure in the run-up from 2010 all the way through to mishandling of Brexit, then the pandemic, and then a mishandling of the energy crisis as well.
How are you planning to reform the Treasury, even when you're in power?
Well, I have to be very careful not to pre-announce any detail in Rachel's speech this evening, but one of the things she's talked about so far is something called the Enterprise and Growth Unit.
That's snappy?
It's snappy, but it's important. So this was something that Labour set up when we were last in government. And people will often say the Treasury says no to lots of things because all they're interested about is the cheapest possible thing. We've got to deliver on our growth mission. Keir Starmer set Rachel and I as the leaders of that growth mission, alongside our colleagues in other teams, to get the economy growing. And so the Enterprise and Growth Unit is the bit of the Treasury that does the wonky analysis about the growth potential around different policies. And Rachel has said that will be brought right up to the centre of her work in setting the budget and making big decisions about the economy.
Why won't you acknowledge as a party that national insurance contributions are a double taxation?
Well, there are 2 forms of taxation on work because we both pay income tax and national insurance. The bit that we point out is that the Conservatives have said they want to abolish it. Fine. How? I mean, they've not set out a plan for how they're going to pay for it. So we can see...
But you acknowledge it's double taxation?
Well, we all pay income tax and national insurance.
Yeah, and it's not ring-fenced for pension contributions. It's not.
What I should have done was bought the report from the actuary, the government actuary, which shows every year when national insurance changes happen, how that affects something called the National Insurance Fund. And the vast majority of the National Insurance Fund goes towards pensions and the remainder goes towards the NHS. So whilst it's...
Not always.
Whilst it's true that chancellors can raid that fund, there is some ring-fencing of national insurance into the National Insurance Fund for pensions in the NHS, and that's on the government actuary reports. It's just what the facts are. And that's why we've said that if the government wants to abolish that at £46 billion a year cost, they're going to have to set out how they're going to raise £46 billion to pay for it, and they refuse to do so.
Thoughts on the Rwanda bill amendments?
Well, we spent a lot of time voting.
10 votes, yeah.
2 hours walking around in
Yeah,
circles.
you did your 10,000 steps there.
I did. Look, the Rwanda policy has always been a gimmick. Even if the government passed the legislation and get a plane off the ground, it will affect, we think, around 1% of asylum seekers who have not had asylum granted and need to go home to their country of origin. And that's why we say, whatever, really. I mean, it's just not going to fix the root cause of the problem. What we think the government should be doing, what Labour's policies are, which Yvette Cooper set out for us, is how you tackle the root cause of the flow of people coming to the country on small boats, which is organised crime and criminal gangs who are saying to people, if you give us money, we'll get you there safely, when that's just not true.
We are beyond the point now, as decent humans, where we should be doing something to make sure that northern Gaza does not starve to death.
Totally agree. And that's something that we have to do with partners and allies. We've all seen the news about President Biden's comments on trying to make aid more available to Gaza. We've been very clear in the UK on a cross-party basis, I think, certainly in the Labour Party, that the proposed offensive into Rafah is something that is unimaginable for the people who are living there, and that shouldn't happen. Not enough aid is getting through, and that offensive is still on the table for Israelis military. We've really got to be able to try to fix this by working with our allies and partners.
OK, but why is, lots of talking going on, not much action going on?
Well, this is difficult, right? I mean, we can lobby the Israelis, we can try to lobby those that have influence over Hamas, we can work with our partners who maybe have better access than we do, for example, the Americans. We can work together to make the case, we can contribute aid, we can come up with ideas, we can offer people to help. But at the end of the day, it's a decision that Hamas and Israel have to take. That's why we've said there needs to be a sustainable humanitarian ceasefire where both sides stop fighting, where the Israeli hostages that are still kept underground are returned, where aid can be made available to people, and that people should get back to a political dialogue about a two-state solution.
When's the election going to be?
Well,
I am asking.
I know, but I don't think I betted a figure when I came to see you last time.
Me.
I shook your hand, but I didn't say for how much. I think you offered £10, and I said May the 2nd, I think, didn't I?
You did say May the 2nd.
So I probably owe you a tenner.
You don't owe it to me, you owe it to John Ashworth's charity.
Oh, was that the deal?
Yeah.
OK, fine. Well, I will make a £10 donation to John Ashworth.
He actually messaged me at the weekend to say he's done his.
Oh, well, I better catch up and pay my bills.
Today?
I'll do it today.
Fantastic.
I'll do it today. But there may be an election on May the 3rd, 4th, 5th or 6th.
There won't be, because he said it's not going to be in May.
No, he said not on that day, which is very specific language.
If there's elections on the 2nd of May, which are local elections, we're not going to go to the polls.
Why would you could move the local election?
Do you want to double your bet?
I told you last time, I'm not a betting man. I'm not a betting man, but it would be better, wouldn't it, for the Prime Minister to just tell us all, whether it's now or in October, or whenever it might be, what the date of the general election will be.
Why would he do that and put you out of your misery?
Well, I think he might need to do it to get his party under control, because they're trying to get rid of him, and it'd be better to set the agenda.
OK, £10 to John Ashworth. I'll check with him later.
I will do so.
OK, it's good to see you as always. Thanks very much indeed. Well.